Okay, we are back in the classroom, just like we never left, right? So I figured I would do a real quick lesson on political parties, run through this just like I would often for a few minutes in class. And so political parties, we know what they are. I think we know the purpose. The main purpose of political parties is to basically get candidates elected that will support their causes, whatever their beliefs are. And so the main goal of political parties is to win elections. Political parties, we have third parties, the Green Party, and there are all sorts, libertarian, there are all sorts of parties that you can look up. There's a good website that we would usually do in class, politics1.com, and it will list political parties, and you can see dozens of them that you would have never heard of. So we have third parties, but we are a two-party system. And so why are there only two parties that have a chance to win? Two real simple points is that our elections are winner take all. So we have, in some countries, it may get a proportion or percentage of if you finish second or third, there's something that you get from it. But in our system, you either win or you get nothing. It's almost like that Talladega Nights line. I know it's a little old movie, but if you ain't first, you're last, and that's the way it is in our political system. You either win or you get nothing. And so if you finish second in any race, then in the Senate, the House, governor, presidential, whatever it is, you are getting nothing to show for it. So it's very difficult for a new party to get started and to gain a foothold and then to move up and rise up. So it's not going to change because our two parties are the ones who'd have to change it, and they're not going to change it. So the number one reason then is it's a winner-take-all system. And then also a winner-take-all system because it will show and it's similar, is the way the Electoral College is set up. Because even though because the states are winner-take-all, the Electoral College system, 48 states are winner-take-all, is set up in a similar way. So if you finish a very close second, and maybe you're a third party, and you finish a close second in North Carolina, and you don't get any electoral votes. So at the end of the day, when you show the results of an election, even if you were close in some states, if you don't win states, you're not getting any electoral votes. And so there's nothing to show for it at all. Even though maybe you wouldn't win the election, if it was more of a proportional system, you would at least show some progress with winning electoral votes, and that doesn't happen. Jumping down to here, though, the impact of third parties can have a big impact, because they can, one of the things that they may try to do is introduce issues or make certain issues be at the forefront of their campaign. So if they introduce certain issues, then maybe the main parties will take those on. But the number one factor the role they can play is they can steal votes. They can steal votes, and steal may not be the right word, but some people call it that. That if you win some votes and you're more of a conservative third party, maybe those were votes that would have gone to the Republican Party and could impact their chances to win. And so those are the main two impacts of the third party. Now, the other two topics to finish with here, critical or realigning elections. Political scientists have labeled 6 elections to have been these really, really important ones that changed politics. And they've named these the 1800, 1828, 1816, 1896. Those 4 I'm not going to get into right now, right? But these are elections that would have done something where they would have flipped the electorate, maybe a region of the country switched, maybe a racial group switched, maybe it started a period of, it probably did start a period of a party dominating. And so these are a party era would begin usually after these elections. So if we just look at sort of case studies, the 1932 and the 1968 elections, those still resonate today. 1932 was at the beginning, in 1929, the stock market crash, and so 1932 is the next presidential election, and Franklin Roosevelt just dominates. And what's going to happen is, from 1932 to 1968, there will be, in this period, only one Republican president. And I'll give you a second to think about who that might be. And so you have a period of just dominating presidential elections. And if you had a chance, do we know? Served 2 terms, but we don't really think of him that much in terms of political science stuff. We think of him as military. And so Dwight Eisenhower served in the 50s, right, and had 2 terms, and he was the only Republican president, but Democrats dominated. One of the reasons that Democrats dominated is they formed this group of consistent voters called the New Deal Coalition. And the New Deal Coalition included in the Democratic Party the people who typically voted Democratic at the time, although this has changed, were the South. And so you had Southern whites. And you also had, because of the way Franklin Roosevelt appealed to certain people, where he was helping disadvantaged people, he appealed to, for the first time, you are, we'll just say Southern whites. He also got the vote of black voters. Now, black voters couldn't vote in the South for the most part, but in the North, black voters had typically voted with the Republican Party because Lincoln had freed the slaves. Well, black voters looked at it and said, you know what, we're the first fired and the last hired in the Great Depression, and maybe Franklin Roosevelt will help us. So a lot of Northern blacks start to vote with the Democratic Party. And then he will get farmers. Some of you maybe remember from APUSH or something, the Dust Bowl. So farmers all over the country will feel like they are aided by FDR. A lot of his welfare programs are going to help cities. And so if you're going to run an election, presidential election, and you're going to win the South, farmers, cities, and blacks, well, you're going to win the election. All right? There's not a lot else left. And so the New Deal Coalition was around, and it was dominated for decades. It appeared to the Republican Party that they would not have a chance. Right? That, holy crap, how are we going to win presidential elections? Well, something then became the issue that's going to split this up. Right? And that will be race, which we'll get to in a second. In 1968, Richard Nixon's going to win, and so you have Nixon here. Okay, he's a Republican, and obviously up here was FDR. I won in 1932. Well, Nixon, the Republican, wins in 1968, and this starts a period where we may still be in this period. We don't know. If Trump were to win another election and then another Republican won for a couple terms, we don't know. We don't know if this party era has ended. But if you just take this period, 1968 to 2008, so 40 years, there were in this period 2 Democratic presidents. Again, give you a second to just think about that. So you go 40 years, Nixon wins in 68, he wins again in 72, but that's the Watergate stuff, and so he ends up having to resign after that. So in that period of 40 years, you had a 4-year sort of blip on the radar almost, where Ford followed Nixon just after Nixon resigned, and then hardly anybody wanted to vote for Republicans because Nixon had been in office with Watergate and all of that. And so Carter wins, Jimmy Carter wins in 1976, and then he just gets crushed in 1980. So you go through 12 more years of Republican presidents, and then Bill Clinton wins. And so you have 2 here in this period where you have 12 years. So you have Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton for 2 terms, right? Now, so by 1965, let's say, roughly, the Democratic Party was just dominating. They were winning both houses of Congress and they were winning the presidency. And so what led to them losing control? What led to the breakup of this New Deal coalition? And I've listed 4 factors here because it seemed to Republicans and Democrats maybe could never blow this, right? If they're going to win all of these people, farmers, cities, the South, a lot of whites, blacks, right? They're going to win elections. And so political scientists have gone through and kind of figured out what happened to the Democratic Party. And we won't get into the economy in the late 70s, and some of your parents may know that, about the situation with the oil problem with the Middle East and OPEC, and there was high inflation. And if I recall, my parents, when they bought a house in the early 1980s, the interest on the house, interest rate was something like 18% or something. And if you know what interest rates are now, 3-4%. On a house, then totally different. So a lot of people blame the economy on Carter. Now, these 3 factors, though, were really big. Democrats and race. This is a huge one. We talked about this in the presidential elections chapter, Democrats and race. When the Democrats are going to give their support to minorities, especially the movement for African Americans to gain voting rights and other rights in the 60s. When they're going to support minorities, they are going to lose many whites, especially Southern whites. And so what is going to happen with Democrats is Democrats feel they're doing the right thing by helping black people and helping black people gain rights. But by doing so, when they help the minority, it will turn off the majority, right? And so a lot of, especially poorer, middle class, poorer whites go, well, what are you doing for us? You're doing all these programs that you started with affirmative action getting started, and you're busing students to integrate schools, and you are passing the Voting Rights Act and passing the Civil Rights Act, and you're doing these things like Head Start and Job Corps and things that appear to be helping inner city African Americans. And so a lot of average white people will leave the Democratic Party. The South will flip to the Republican Party. And the South as a whole, majority of southern states have never since voted for a Democratic candidate unless the Democrats run a Southerner. When the Democrats run a Southerner like Jimmy Carter or Bill Clinton, then they will win southern states. But other than that, the Republicans have dominated presidential elections in the South. So that was one big factor, the support for minorities. Vietnam and communism. Democrats were blamed for Vietnam and maybe not handling it right, especially Lyndon Johnson, the Democrat. And they're also blamed by a lot of people for losing China. Okay, during the period right after World War II, China falls to communism. And so it appeared that they weren't tough enough, I guess, or strong enough, or didn't know how to fight the wars against communists. And so that hurt them. And then finally, culture wars. Basically, what Republicans use is they use things that are these issues that are called wedge issues. Wedge issues are controversial issues that will divide. Sorry for my writing, but they will divide the electorate. Issues that maybe the Democrats take a stance on, but the Republicans take a stance where they can gain votes who might have normally been Democratic voters. And so, as an example, over the years, flag burning was used by the first President Bush. Gay marriage was used by the second President Bush. Abortion has been used in the past. It might be things like voter ID, a wall, okay, something where it's something where if most voters, I'm running a little short on time, but if this was how the spectrum of voters was divided, okay, so you had, and you go, okay, well, here's the 50%. Well, in terms of Democrats, when you look at groups like this, well, in terms of should and the party that maybe they identify with, there are more who identify with the Democratic Party. So if this is the 50% mark and Democrats are here, well, what the Republicans have done is they have used wedge issues to drive a wedge where maybe they have used an issue and they've gone like this and they've chipped off these Democrats to come vote for them. And they've used another issue and they've gone like this and chipped off Democrats to come vote for them. And so that would be an issue, again, like a wall. Like typical Republicans would vote for Trump no matter what, but then there might be people who are maybe lower class whites and living in certain parts of the country, who knows, and they look at it and they're like, yeah, we need a wall. And so that's the thing that gets someone who may have been a Democrat to vote with the Republican Party. When the first George Bush used flag burning, is that really a big issue in America? But he uses flag burning, and that is going to get a lot of average people to go, yeah, don't burn my flag, even though maybe economically they maybe don't identify with the Republican Party. And so using these issues has been a very smart strategy for Republicans to try to win presidential elections. It may be smart, or it may be sneaky, or cheap, or however you look at it, but it has helped them get some people who maybe would be typically Democrats to vote with the Republican Party. So anyway, that was a real quick speed through, I guess, or rush through of the political parties chapter, and I'm not sure if you can read all my notes, but hopefully it's a little bit better maybe to see me up here once in a while instead of just sitting at my desk at home. So all the best to everybody and enjoy.